entrenched positions for the good people of Ghana.
This is Top Story with Evans Mensah.
And Top Story is always brought to you by Vodafone and by Prime Insurance. There is tonight a high-level, desperate charm offensive to avert further violence in Parliament, with the e-levy set to return. The Speaker of Parliament himself, Alban Babin, who himself has come under some sharp criticism from mainly the majority side. In fact, last night on PM Express, we had the deputy. First Deputy Speaker of Parliament criticized him for failing to condemn the recent violence that he believes was initiated and triggered by the NDC side. Alban Babin is himself tonight initiating these urgent mediation talks with the leadership of Parliament from both sides, the NDC and the MPP sides, and is getting backing tonight from the leadership of the Council of State. They have been holding urgent talks today with hopes that they can resolve these differences. But even as these talks begin tonight, we are already hearing from the First Deputy Speaker of Parliament, who is clear and emphatic that he will definitely cast his ballot again if the same scenario repeats itself. Remember, the last time he attempted to vote while he was presiding, when the e-levy came up, his actions triggered violence on the floor. He says he hasn't changed his stance, and if the matter comes up again whilst he's presiding, he is entitled to take a break and cast his ballot. The minority side have also said if that happens again, then they cannot guarantee that there will not be a repeat of the violence in the House. So these mediation talks that have begun tonight, will they yield any results? We'll hear from the Council of State pretty shortly and speak to a leading member of the council who he's been very instrumental in today's talks. But let's start tonight from Nana Oto Srebo. He's the chairman of the Council of State, speaking today when they opened the talks with the Speaker.
Mr. Speaker, I don't want to bore you with the litany of things that are happening in Parliament, because you know them better than all of us. There have been institutional, there have been ego issues, there have been procedural issues, there have been a whole host of issues. Even physical sometimes, which is the least to be desired. But we feel, as our elders say, that it is bent but not broken, and that to be mended. And that to be able to mend it effectively, you need to start from brass tacks. You need to start from brass tacks and listen to whatever remote or mere causes that it may be. To that end, Mr. Speaker, we engaged the leadership of the Minority Caucus last week, Wednesday, and they were very, very frank with us. They opened up, told us all that they felt, and they came out of the meeting very much refreshed. As you rightly said, unless the patient opens up, the doctor may give the wrong diagnosis. We followed that with a meeting with the leadership of the Majority Caucus yesterday, and it was equally rewarding and extremely refreshing.
So that's the chair of the Council of State. Very optimistic on the back of two meetings they've already held they've held with the minority side, the minority leadership, and the majority leadership, and he's optimistic that those conversations have been fruitful. We will hear his thoughts on the entrenched positions very, very shortly. But the Speaker himself, in the last couple of hours, he himself committing to lead urgent mediation talks also between the leadership, because of course he's the head of that house, and in anticipation of the e-levy returning to the house. Listen to the Speaker.
And I had that kind of painful cesarean operation, and that's the product seated before you. And you all saw what happened. So we are always open to counsel, to advice, and I must say we are extremely grateful that you took this step. We have others that are also doing so. And this weekend, I decided to organize a workshop for the leadership of Parliament with some elders to moderate and facilitate some issues. None of us is happy the way things are going. But I keep on saying that in spite of the hopes and expectations, temper it with the real challenges that such a new system will actually offer to us Ghanaians. We've never had such a hung parliament before. And you know, governance is usually run by majority. And so when you fail sometimes to have majority, decision taking becomes a serious challenge. And particularly the system.
Let's go to Parliament. Let's bring in our parliamentary correspondent, Parker Wilson, who's been following these urgent, desperate talks tonight. Parker, so it appears to me from what I've heard that the talks for now are over. They've met both sides of the House. Now they've met the leader, the Speaker himself. That's done, right? What next?
Evans, the next step for the Council of State is to put together a roadmap in addressing the challenges in Parliament. They are unhappy with the recent development, and of course, we have to speak up rightly there as well. He's also not happy that the image of Parliament is gradually degenerating into a boxing arena. And so urgent steps must be taken to ensure that there is a harmony, particularly between the majority caucus and the minority caucus. So we already know that they've engaged the minority and the majority. So the members of the Council of State will now go back to the drawing table, project their concerns and the challenges that they were able to establish in the course of their conversation with these three parties, and then put together a detailed roadmap, a solution on how they can use their powers and wisdom, as Nana Ocho-Shibo would put it, to assist the promotion of parliamentary democracy. Because they have maintained that Parliament, being the third arm of the executive, would ensure that it works effectively to complement the work of the executive. So they are in to support the aid Parliament and the Speaker, and also ensure that there is coherence prevailing between the majority leadership and the minority leadership.
I mean, Parker, we know, what has happened in Parliament in the last few months, fundamentally because of entrenched positions taken by both sides, and nobody seemed to yield at all. This came up today in these talks with the Speaker. Particularly, the chairman of the Council of State was clear that to make any meaningful progress in trying to avert further violence on the floor, both sides must drop these entrenched positions and come to a place where they can build consensus.
That has been the position of political scientists, even some of the backbenchers of the minority leadership. It is their view that it appears the majority caucus is rather taking that entrenched position, and they have, in the last 1 year, cooperated with the majority caucus, and every government business in the House has been approved, but for the e-levy. So they deserve, I'm talking about the minority, they claim that they deserve some credit because the e-levy is what they are opposed to and not government business entirely. So it appears that if the majority caucus would not abandon their entrenched position and drop the e-levy, then there will be a challenge. And so it is clear that the two sides of the House, when it comes to the electronic levy, that is the e-levy, they have all taken an entrenched position. Government is bent on approving it. Minority is equally bent on rejecting it. The only thing that will make the NPP government sail through with the e-levy is when they are able to marshal all their 138 MPs in the chamber.
But we know
that will not happen.
But we know the last time there was violence on the floor, I think the worst of the lot that we've seen, it wasn't necessarily about the e-levy. It was about a controversy surrounding whether Joe Owusu can cast his ballot when he's presiding. He attempted to leave, and then that is what really triggered the violence. And so that decision on to consider the bill on the certificate of urgency didn't even go through at all. It appears tonight, from what we're hearing, that that position hasn't changed. Listen to Joe Sowusu himself on that very controversial matter, which of course led to that recent violence on the floor when the e-levy came for consideration. He says he still stands by that decision, and that if that scenario plays out again, he believes he's entitled to take a break and go cast his ballot.
My insistence is not to vote from the chair, but as and when necessary, I will leave the chair if I'm the one presiding, or the second deputy speaker presiding can leave the chair and change over so that he can also exercise his vote. And
But
that I insist on it.
But you can't do that because the standing of the 113 on the process for a division is clear. After the time that you call for that voice vote and you, in your discretion, decides the voice vote is not enough to settle the matter, so let's move to a head count. At that time you make that call, you only make that call because you were not part of the voice vote, and so you need a clarity. How then do you become part post that in breaking the tie?
You see, if you go read the whole standing order, the part dealing with head count or division, it says that even a member who was not in the chamber,
True.
and who did not even hear the question put,
Is entitled to vote.
is entitled to vote.
Yes.
What about me? I'm a member. I heard the question because I was presided in vote. But when it comes to the head count, my right is not taken
But your
away.
position creates an absurdity, does it not?
How?
Because the whole idea of a division stems from a speaker's inability to rely on a voice vote to reach a conclusion.
Yeah.
So once you have presided over you call for the voice vote, now you are asking, in effect, to break the tie, to conclude, and you need a head count. Then that same speaker, having started the process and admitted that I cannot determine this because I've called for a vote, then now becomes
It's not that the speaker
decider.
does not determine. The speaker has actually determined it's aye or no. But it has been challenged.
Challenged, true.
Right.
True.
You know, so
Then you now become the tiebreaker. After you have presided over
you
that,
can call it a tiebreaker.
In
but
this-
to
in
say
this
that
instance, it is.
I become a member of the House once I leave the seat.
but you admit that at least the fairness in interpreting the rules that makes it absurd.
No, it doesn't. If you go through the standing orders, you find that at committees, it says that the presiding chairman does not vote unless there's a tie. And when there's a tie, the chairman has a casting vote. All right? He is the chairman, he's presiding, he puts a question. But it is intended that when there's a tie, the chairman will cast a vote. If you read carefully the constitutional provision and the standing orders, it says he does not retain his original vote. What happens to a casting vote? Does that not suggest something? So the original vote was not exercised, but I can get down when we are doing the other one and vote.
When you've
You see?
begun the process.
Yes. Well, so let me put it this way. Then government can never do anything, cannot have decide a decision on any matter on which...
But
it
if
doesn't-
that's what the Constitution says, that is what it is.
And so that is why the member's vote should never be constrained, because he assumes an additional responsibility.
You can see that your position, as we saw, triggered violence.
It shouldn't. I mean, I
But
am
that was a reality.
disappointed that the media, the speaker himself, do not condemn the violence. It triggered violence. Why should that be?
The speaker had called, had to chastise the entire House recently.
Why the entire House? Was the violence caused by the entire House?
But it was Parliament.
I think that we should call people by name and their behavior. Otherwise, there's a group description and the real culprits get away.
So that's Joe Sowusu there, and he's the first Deputy Speaker of Parliament. Very clear that his position hasn't shifted. Parker, you were in Parliament that day when he attempted to go and derobe, as he says, and then come back and cast his ballot, and that triggered this minutes of violence on the floor. He says he's not changed his position. This is very entrenched indeed. This issues such as this came up today, and they from what I understand, the Council of State is very clear that to move forward, this has to change.
And Evans, you recall that very day, December 21, when we saw the worst of the chaos in Parliament. The explanation by the majority leader at the time, if you recall, was that the first Deputy Speaker, Joseph, said she was not really feeling well, so he was exiting the chair to go and take his medication, and not necessarily that he was going to come and partake in the voting process in the chamber. But however, I must say that the minority caucus is clear that any time, whether it is the first Deputy Speaker of Parliament or the second Deputy Speaker of Parliament in the Speaker's seat, they will resist any attempt by the two, whoever is in the chair, to partake in a vote in the chamber. If they try that, they will resist it. But the position of the majority has always been that they have the right to do that, and they will do that. So it was one of the things that came up in the meeting today, which they talked about the entrenched position. Another issue is about whether indeed the current composition of the 8th Parliament is a hung Parliament. And Evans, you call in the documentary that we did, Ghana's hung Parliament, a blessing or curse, the majority leader himself, Mr. Bonsu, insisted that it is not a hung Parliament. The NPP has majority in Parliament, and the NDC is the minority. The NDC also insisted in that same documentary that it's a hung Parliament. So it appears that the two groups, the two caucuses, have taken an entrenched position. And this is something that the Noto Sherbrooke, the chairman of the Council of State, is unhappy with. That this kind of posture going forward would not generate the kind of consensus building they need in Parliament. So it is better they work their differences and try to bend one way or the other for each other, create room from each other to ensure that at least government business is not being obstructed.
And they came out of the meeting very much refreshed. As you rightly said, unless the patient opens up, the doctor may give the wrong diagnosis. We followed that with a meeting with the leadership of the majority caucus yesterday, and it was equally rewarding and extremely refreshing. Very, very uplifting, and very much to be happy about. Parliament stands on the tripod of legs: the minority, the majority, and of course the speakership. And for Parliament to be strong, all these arms should be strong and to be coordinated in such a way that there's harmony amongst all the three various legs and arms. So we felt that you, the Speaker, who will speak for Parliament, it would be remiss on our part if we attempted to prefer any solutions without having the benefit of hearing directly from you and from your perspective as Speaker, and also the fact that you have been in Parliament all these years and you know how Parliament should run. I've told the two caucuses the other day, yesterday and last week, that Parliament should be awesome, but should not by any means awful. And we should all have the awe and reverence that is due Parliament. So we have to make it work. We can't do anything otherwise. We have only one Ghana. We have no choice but to make sure that things come on board, and then people will bury their egos and their entrenched positions for the good people of Ghana, for today and for posterity's sake. Because we do not want history to be written and then we are put down as the 8th Parliament or the 8th Council of State, which sat down for things to go by.
So that's the chairman of the Council of State there addressing the gathering today on the back of everything else that had happened today in Parliament. Parker is still with me. Parker, you've talked about in Parliament itself today, though. Was there a proper sitting?
Evans, come again with a question.
Did Parliament actually do business today?
Oh, of course. Parliament was in session today, just about 30 to 40 minutes ago. Parliament ended the proceedings for today. Largely, and Evan, last week we talked about how the absence of some NPP MPs is really affecting government business. I indicated to you that the motions that have been programmed for discussion last Friday was again captured in today's order paper, and none of them was tabled before the House for consideration. What the House did today was to invite the minister responsible for transport to come and brief the House or answer some questions from members of Parliament. One key question that became quite controversial in the House was what the ministry is doing, the transport ministry is doing to reduce road accidents. And members of Parliament were very passionate about this development. They have raised concerns that drivers sometimes are very reckless on the road. And again, we know that some markets, one way or the other, start coming up along the roadside, which is also unhealthy. They cited places like Medina, just so among others, and asked the minister what's being done. The suggestion has been that they are going to fence all those places, and again, together with the National Road Safety Commission, begin a massive campaign to educate drivers on how to be responsible on the road.
Paga, thank you very much. And indeed, still with this conversation that has now started with the Speaker, the Council of State, all expressing this urgent desire to try and avert the threat of violence on the floor. Remember that now we've heard from Joe Owusu, who says, well, his position on the matter of voting whilst presiding hasn't changed. We've heard earlier this year from the Minority Chief Whip, Muntaka Mubarak, who had declared quite categorically that he cannot guarantee that there will not be more violence on the floor if indeed the Speaker, the First Deputy Speaker, happens to preside and attempts to vote again. He says he cannot guarantee that that will not spark further violence on the floor.
Look, it's very shameful. It's very painful. It is very unfortunate. And we keep apologizing. As long as people want to alter the rules, you can never guarantee that there will be no what we call confusion in the chamber. It's not possible. Anything that happens on the floor of Parliament, when it comes to its processes, it's a closed book. You can't contest it anywhere. So because of that, if you allow it to happen, that's it. You are out. So because of that, it makes it extremely difficult when the rules are being, altered to favor a certain situation.
So the point to notice, if the majority side next week, assuming the Speaker goes on his review, and Joseph Owusu sits, and Joseph has already interpreted the Constitution to say he can vote.
Yeah.
If that plays out again, you say there are no guarantees that we can't expect disturbance on the floor.
I can bet you will resist that.
So that's the story. The trend positions are still very, very entrenched indeed. Let's speak to a former member of Parliament, immediate past member of Parliament. He was a ranking on the Constitutional Legal Affairs Committee. Joins us with a quick thought on these talks. Mr. Yunusa Hussaini, I'm grateful that you could join us for a quick chat on this.
Thank you, Evans.
So the house you left, we've seen this hung Parliament that has played out. Led to the violence, etc., etc. We now know that the Council of State is trying to mediate. The Speaker himself is trying to get the parties to sit and talk. There are other eminent Ghanaians who are also doing so. This is a proper charm offensive because we know the ELIB is going to go back. The main bone of contention has been around if Joe Owusu is sitting, can he vote? He says he can. We've heard Muntaka say if he does that, then we can guarantee that there won't be violence. Really, do you really see that these talks can yield any positive outcomes with these entrenched positions the way they are?
Well, these talks are already yielding positive outcomes, not so. The people are talking. I remember back in my days as a student at Legon, the Mensah Bonsu, now a Supreme Court judge, said that there is no issue that cannot be resolved by communication. And so they are communicating, they are talking to each other. And so they might find middle ground. And that is very important. We must recognize that. The absence of dialogue can lead to confrontations. And so, yes, and that is why the efforts of the Peace Council and other eminent Ghanaians who have sought to talk on the rift in Parliament is commendable. I think that they need to work out a program. The numbers are such that if Joseph Osei is presiding, then he's not allowed to vote, then any controversial issue where the parties take entrenched positions will fail by the dictates of the Constitution and the standing orders of Parliament. So they need to work out a formula where very important matters that are controversial, the Speaker will be available to preside, and then the status quo is maintained. So if members of the majority are not available to push through the policy of government, then no one can blame it on the first or second deputy speaker presiding and wanting to vote. So I think that because the precarious nature of Parliament and the numbers, most matters that will require division and debate and division in Parliament, the Speaker must endeavor to preside.
That's very interesting. I mean, and circumstances sometimes make that impossible. We've seen that twice already now. That's a challenge, isn't it?
That's all that is planning. So the Speaker has to attend to his health, but he's available to preside in Parliament. When he's in Ghana and when his health permits him. And so the leadership of Parliament, in particular the Business Committee, must work hard to identify matters that will require that the Speaker's presence in Parliament is necessary and important to maintain the status quo. Because, like what Muntaka Mubarak has said, the minority chief whip, even though it's a vague area, the law says that a deputy speaker presiding cannot vote. So if the deputy speaker relinquishes the seat to the second deputy speaker, he will no longer be presiding. I think that was what he wanted to do, to take the gap in the law, the lacuna, sort of. But in fact, it's not a lacuna, but because the practice has always been that for the purposes of voting, a speaker presiding does not come down to vote. And that was precisely because the majority side of Parliament did not require or need the vote of a first deputy speaker, or the minority side did not require the vote of the second deputy speaker. But now the numbers are tight. And so what happens? To break the logjam, I think that the speaker must endeavor to preside on very critical matters of policy, which will require a division in the House.
And indeed, that was the only bone of contention the last time this levy matter came up. And if that is resolved, as in if the Speaker himself is in the chamber, you can safely say that we may not see a repeat of the violence. And as we've heard Muntaka say, it's only when First Deputy Speaker is presiding and decides to either take a break or leave his chair to go and cast his ballot that they cannot guarantee that there will not be violence. I'm grateful, Inusa Fuseni. Listen, this is your parliament, right? This is your parliament. You've heard the talks now, attempts from all sides, Council of State, the Speaker, himself, eminent Ghanaians, all trying to mediate to avert further violence. What's your take on this, and how can this be resolved amicably? I want to hear from you. 055-11-11997. On News Night tonight,